Welcome to Start Lines and Swag Bags. The airing of this podcast is for entertainment purposes only and is not intended to replace advice from professional medical or training staff. Thank you for listening and your support of the Flying Pig Project.
Hi, it's Rachel. Welcome to Start Lines and Swag Bags. When I recorded this podcast a couple days ago, I created the introduction while I was filming the whole episode, and I ended up scrapping the whole introduction because I didn't like it, and I'm allowed to do that. My guest, when we were talking before the episode, he shared some things with me that I appreciated. And there's butter up in the background if you're watching the video. Okay. Anyway, we were talking about like scripted or planned questions and all of that. And, he was sharing with me how much he liked, the more genuine nature of my podcast. We have a lot of oops, we have a lot of edits. But he called out one of my introductions I did on a day that I was particularly tired, and I had to get an intro shot for an episode I recorded. And I know the episode. It was I don't know whose episode it was, but the intro was the day of the Shamrock Shuffle. And I had been up from like 4 o'clock in the morning. And when I finally got around to doing the intro, I'm like laying on the couch. I had my nice volunteer hat on. And I remember saying, wow, I'm tired. So I thought I'd do the intro now. Well, one, because Marty needs it to release the episode. Two, I'm just tired. I'm permanently tired. I'm a special education teacher. I'm really tired. And three, this episode, I think you're really going to enjoy it. But I'm going to tell you, when I replayed this episode, I started to think, just for a couple minutes, did I create this podcast for me or for you? Who am I trying to help? Because there's going to be a couple moments in the pod that I'm having these aha moments in this conversation. We discussed a couple things that I plan on putting into practice that I think are going to be very helpful for me. And I didn't plan for that to happen. It just happened. My guest today is Dr. Justin Aquino. He is a doctor of physical therapy. And we got to talk about things like your runner identity when you're hurt. We talked about we talked about compliance, which to me is a 4-letter word. I live and die by compliance in my profession, which is probably why when it comes to self-care, I tend to be more fast and loose with compliance because there's nobody there checking me. Whereas for a living, I have everybody checking me. So that's something that I personally took away from this episode. Justin is going to be back many, many times. We're going to turn this into a little bit of a series with him. So after you listen to the episode, if you come up with a topic that you would like us to address in a future episode, reach out to me in any way you can. Facebook, Instagram, theflyingpigproject.com. And I think within the next week, the actual launch of the Flying Pig Project store. Anyway, please enjoy this episode with Justin. I think everyone who listens to it is going to have a takeaway. Thank you as always for listening to Start Lines and Swag Bags, presented by the Flying Pig Project. Embrace the crazy to unlock a world of possibilities. Thank you. I'd like you to please welcome the champion pizza eating, world famous Korean karaoke performer, and doctor of physical therapy, Justin Aquino.
That's a really good intro. I am so flattered. But yeah, thanks for having me on. For those who don't know me, I'm Justin. I'm a doctor of physical therapy. I got my doctorate almost 8 years ago now from New York Medical College in Westchester County, New York. So it's about an hour and change north of Manhattan. I was there for about 5 years in New York City working, and then I eventually moved to Illinois about 3 years ago now, and I've been here ever since.
Why did you move to Illinois?
So my wife is from Illinois, so general marriage things that tend to happen. But I've always liked Illinois when I visited, mainly like Chicago, doing stuff as a expat type of person. But as I've lived in the area and growing up in New Jersey, I was kind of used to the suburban life, so it wasn't a huge transition. But getting back to long commutes by car versus public transportation in Manhattan is definitely uh, a change that is much more welcome now.
You grew up in New Jersey?
I'm a Jersey boy.
You have no accent.
So, so what I'm always unsure about is when people have mentioned like you don't have a Jersey accent, and then it's like, oh yeah, New Jersey. I'm like, I don't know anyone who says that. Um, but I do like seeing some of those, like I think it's like a BuzzFeed article about what's an iconic New Jersey trait, and I have a handful of them, and I was like, oh man, that's pretty true.
Give an example.
So I guess growing up, I never really said go to the beach. I usually say down the shore, like the Jersey Shore.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I reference where I live based off what exit on a expressway. Exactly.
So,
And then
what does
I
that
think another
sound like?
one.
So what do you, like, say it.
Wait,
Like,
sorry.
how would you say it?
Oh, so like, oh, I live off exit 123 off the turnpike.
Oh,
And then people are just like, okay. It really is that like automatic for New Jersey residents. At least I think so.
okay. So I'm going to break this up because I did introduce several facets. First of all, uh, the pizza eating, because you threw that at me as something, a characteristic that I should point out. Why?
I mean, as a runner, people talk about the importance of carbs, right? And I feel like, I try to learn as much information as I can with anything I really do. So once I kind of got into running again, upon moving to the Midwest, it was kind of like, all right, like haven't had like the greatest running career up to that point. So how can I make this round better? And a lot of it came to like preparation. So I was like, oh, okay, good carbs, but I don't really eat simple things, meaning like I don't have many like 3 ingredient recipes and call it a day. Um, so
Really?
yeah, like I feel like especially with my uh Filipino background, there's a lot of like ingredients and stuff that I was exposed to. But I can't always have that right before a key workout or a long run or a race. So, pizza has always been a nice simple option, but you can still add some variety to it and still have it really, really good. But then next thing you know, I have a pizza and then I'm like, oh, I only have like 2 slices left. I guess I'll just finish it. I usually don't, but that question does come up.
I'm I'm laughing because I am that way as well. If you get a pizza at home and you finish like half of it,
Mm-hmm.
why not just eat the whole thing?
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm going to DoorDash Lou Malnati's tonight. Now
It's a
that
good
you
plan.
now that I'm writing that down on my things to do. But let's settle just this real quick so I know,
Mm-hmm.
I got to know what I'm walking into here. Do you put pineapple on your pizza?
Not like routinely, but I'm not against it.
Okay, you may have gained some viewers with that, and you may have lost a couple with that. Would you like to discuss your world famous? I'm giving you world famous Korean karaoke title.
So this whole situation arose during our end of the year party. So this is like around December 2024. And someone on our run team was kind of like, oh yeah, let's just do karaoke. And I was like, oh, I love karaoke. I'm so down. And it was just kind of like that idea that was planted in multiple people's minds, but we don't really know if it was going to unfold. And then as the party was ending, because we had like not a curfew, but like a cutoff time of at the venue we were at, it's like, okay, well, we're gonna go now. And I was like, okay, who's going? But like I love karaoke, so it wasn't a really hard sell for me. The hardest thing for me is staying up late, and a lot of people on the team know that I'm someone who really prioritizes sleep. So it's like, oh my gosh, it's like 10:30. Like, I don't know if I could do this. But then I asked Nicole, my wife, like, are you down to go? And she's like, why not? Okay. And then, once we got there, there was a handful of us. And I always find it interesting when we go to karaoke because it's always kind of like, all right, who's going to set the tone? What kind of music are we looking for? Is someone really not in the headspace that has like certain feelings that arises when they're partying? So I usually try to read the room, kind of get the vibe, and there's a lot of like upbeat songs, but I want to like jamming out everyone involved. So naturally I try to pick a song that has a lot of tempo. Generally a lot of people will know it and it's really easy to sing. All right, easy to sing as in like people know the words,
right?
But the song was I Want to Dance with Somebody by Whitney Houston. And I'm not trying to say that I have any voice equivalence to Whitney Houston, but I love that song. It's so uplifting. It's so fun. And Rachel was kind of like, why would you do this? Why did you choose this song? It's like, I thought it'd be good. And we did it anyway.
If I remember, I think there was 9 of us.
Roughly, yeah.
There were 7 or 9. Mm-hmm. But have you ever been to a Korean karaoke place before?
That has been the only karaoke place I've gone to, especially when I was living in New York. It was kind of like, I don't know, every couple months. All right, let's go to karaoke. But I did have my first, I guess, non-Korean karaoke experience from Mike Balian.
Oh, yeah. Oh, well, yeah.
And I was like, you want me to perform in front of people I don't know?
What was that at Banditos?
Maybe. Is that the one in East Dundee?
Yeah, it's Banditos.
Yeah. It was like after a track workout. Yeah. He's like, let's just go. I'm like, all right.
Yeah, I have sung on that stage as well. Once.
It's pretty fun though. Like I actually like that there's a band. Yeah. So
the Korean karaoke, for anybody who doesn't know, I guess you're in a room just with your people. Mm-hmm. So thankfully you're singing just with your group, and I did like that because you are only with people you know. Mm-hmm. And yeah. All right, so that's that. Now, Doctor of Physical Therapy. Okay, so where do you practice?
So I actually have 2 locations that I work at. So it's the same company, but so 2 of the days of the week I work in like a more traditional outpatient clinic in the northern suburbs. And then I also work the other 3 days at a high school. And the high school is pretty nice. And it allows, the student body mainly, but there's also like faculty that I've worked with. And just carry out physical therapy during their school day.
Okay, so now that we know some about you, I think where I'd like to start our journey together, because there's so many different areas we can go, is really starting at the beginning. I've been referred to physical therapy multiple times for different injuries. And I think sometimes physical therapy has a connotation to it that it's not, for me, it's a slow process. But let's start like day one. Like you get somebody fresh off, a referral for physical therapy or an injury. What's your process? How do you start?
Yeah, so I really like to get, the story from the patient or the individual because as much as like a script can be helpful, especially if they saw a medical professional already, it doesn't necessarily give me that many details. And I think especially when we talk about, what's the best plan of care for someone, everyone lives their lives differently and they may not necessarily see their life the way that a doctor would see it. So really just trying to bridge the doctor's referral, the patient's story, and then me trying to make sure everything has some continuity is the most important thing. So it really is just kind of like putting the ball in the patient's court and be like, tell me what brings you in today. What are your pain points and where do you want to go? Because everyone's goals can vary as well.
I will say, it's kind of a back to basics in that if a runner comes to you or anybody comes to you, they with some type of issue, in their mind, the number one thing is how do I get back to running per se?
Hmm.
Now, I know one of my recent injuries was I had a potential torn meniscus in the knee, and it was how do I get back to running? And my PT kind of had to back me up. She's like, how is this affecting your life? How is this affecting your day to day? Can you get up the stairs? Can you get down the stairs? Can you get out of your car?
Hmm.
Because as a patient, you don't think that way. Your first concern is, I can't run. Well, if you can't run, it's probably impacting your life in other ways. How do you feel like people react to you when introduce that concept? Because that's a fairly straightforward concept that we don't necessarily want to admit.
Oh yeah, definitely. I'll say just to kind of add some context. So I've taken a bunch of like, running rehab analysis courses since my career has started. And one of the courses that I really, really enjoyed kind of talked about kind of more like the perceptual mental side of being a runner. And essentially when you think of a traditional runner, right? Like that's probably the first thing they're gonna tell you. It's like, oh yeah, like my name's Justin, I like to run. And then when you when you remove that facet of someone's life, it's essentially like an identity crisis. So you have a lot of these kind of, barriers that come up. It's like, I don't know what to do with my time. Like people kind of like spiral, right? And when you talk to any like healthcare professional, it's always like you have to be able to empathize with your patients. And I think it is a challenge for everyone. And especially for someone whose job and desire is to help people out. But to truly understand what someone's going through, like that is honestly the first step. So kind of thinking like if I was walking this person's shoes and I can't run anymore, what do I do? They may not know what to do. And I think, bringing up a important point of like, are you defined by your ability to run? And most people at face value will say no, but they may not be able to tell you in that moment because they're so caught up in what they're feeling and not able to do.
Um, that Yeah, that hits home because because you don't think about it like that, but I like that. Hi, I'm Rachel. I'm a runner. I can't run, so that does affect your identity. You can't do what how you primarily view yourself. And what does that mean? I didn't think about that. Yeah, that's why we do the show. Um,
Exactly.
because sometimes I've known some runners who their injury when they're out and they're just like with us, you can tell it's physically impairing them. Like they're having trouble walking, they're limping, and all of this. And it's like, are they accepting the situation that they have to resolve that, not just from a runner's perspective, but from movements of daily life perspective?
Hmm.
Oh, I like that. All right, so we're going to go very broad today, okay? Because now this person has come in and they've talked to you. And I think one thing I know I was challenged by is the PT telling me, okay, you're going to come see me 2 times for 4 weeks, 2 times a week for 4 weeks.
Mhm.
Then we'll reevaluate. What? What do you have to say about that?
So it is kind of more like the scripted things that we learn in PT school and also our clinical rotations, but there is some evidence about that, but maybe it's just not necessarily elaborated. And I think that's usually kind of the main barrier to why someone doesn't necessarily stay compliant with PT, because essentially most injuries tend to be what we call like non-traumatic. So it's not like someone like falls down the stairs, like breaks a bone, gets hit by a car. It's generally not those things, but it's just kind of that I was fine until I wasn't.
Right.
And I think the biggest sell for me a PT is to really kind of give a accurate timeline of things, but that has to be based on how long has someone been hurt or experiencing this pain, what is their presentation, and what are their goals. You mentioned an injury you had earlier, and I could see 10 people with that condition, like that script. But if someone's like, let's say three people are runners, some people are, let's say, in their older years and just want to be able to like walk around, be comfortable, do what they want to do with let's say being in retirement, and then some other people are somewhere in the middle. um, but being able to accurately give a timeline of PT is probably the most challenging thing that I can give, because I always tend to feel like I speak in like the gray areas instead of black and white. But sadly, that's life. And, mainly because we can tell you how long it takes, generally speaking, let's say a tendon injury, a muscle injury, a bone injury. We can tell you that
Mhm.
if there's no hiccups. We
Right.
can tell someone when they could improve their muscle strength, their flexibility, things like that, just for day to day life. But when it comes to like sports and performance, like there's a lot of not necessarily ambiguity, but like there's a lot of variables that can change. So being able to be like, hey, let's say you're a competitive basketball player. When can I play basketball? And my question is, define that for me. Are you trying to go to practice? Are you just trying to shoot around with some friends? Or are you trying to play in like a AAU basketball tournament like every weekend because that's what you do? And those goals will change the timeline that I would give. But getting
Mhm.
that cell on hopefully getting an accurate representation of the rehab process, but then also kind of laying out foundational goals that are actually realistic. Um, yeah, I'd probably say those things.
Well, and two things I take away from that, you do kind of have to look at the whole person, because to your point of, if you have 10 people who are all coming with a possible tear in the knee, if you have, like, say, 3 runners who, overall are in very good health, they've got a good core, they do strength work, all those things that play. And then maybe you've got some people who live a more sedentary lifestyle. The recovery time is going to be much different for those two sets of people.
Mhm.
Um, but the one word that you said that I know is going to come up time and time again is compliant. Um, I know one of the pitfalls I had was, I was given exercises to do at home. Okay, if you all know me and have been listening to my podcast, you know that giving me exercises to do at home, yeah, and
So good luck.
yeah, but like how, yeah, it's a great exercise to do there.
Mhm.
So how do you handle? I think, because it's your field, you have to come up with your own way to understand that that's a huge challenge when dealing with patients.
Mhm.
Is simply compliance.
Yep. So over the course of honestly the pandemic kind of helped kind of shape how I do things now. So before 2020, I used to be someone's like, hey, if you do your exercises first thing in the morning, because everyone's like feeling fresher generally, they kind of get their day in set in the right direction. And it's like, all right, you checked off your homework and you're good. But as the pandemic shifted everyone's work time, leisure time, downtime, all being at home. And especially when I was in New York City, there's so many people. So that was always a, soft subject. But I would essentially have people follow my recommendation of doing things first thing in the morning. I see them 2 days later, let's say, and like I don't feel any different. And then I was thinking, what changed? What really resulted in like that working for the last 3 years until now? And the context of, everyone sits and like sitting's the new smoking, as they say. But that position or similar positions for a long enough time, our bodies are super adaptive. They want to try to make our lives easier. So if your body's conditioned to be kind of in like this sitting position for 8 to 12 hours, on a not so bad day, it's like, all right, cool. But, we're not many people wanted to necessarily take more out of their day to do exercises. So that made me shift like, well, I have to see things outside of just a moment in time, but maybe just a course of the day or a course of the week and kind of stack those things together. So how I kind of shifted the compliance with the exercise program standpoint is basically, can I stack some movement or some exercises that already are naturally fit into your day? So let's say, for example, actually, I had an evaluation earlier this week. It's someone who at the high school had an injury and was kind of like working back into a sport and was like, I don't really have time outside of school, practice, other things like that. And I'm like, well, I know a couple things that you'll definitely be doing, which is sitting at some point and sleeping at some point. So if I can kind of work around those two to start and then kind of fill in other parts of the day as I learn an individual more, then it's like, hey, instead of doing 3 sets of 10, because that's the common prescription of exercises, right? So I flip it, 10 sets of 3. If someone has a hard time filling in 3 reps of an exercise, which would take what, 10, 15 seconds max, that's a really chaotic schedule. That's really hard to come around in a handful of days to get better, right? But really being able to manifest change routinely over the day, stack that over the rest of the week, stack that over weeks and months. And next thing you know, you have a foundation that allows you to not be that stiff anymore. And when you don't do those habits that you built, that's what feels weird. And then you just always want to do that.
If someone could have just told me earlier that I could do 10 sets of 3 instead of 3 sets of 10.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, everyone, first of all, again, check with your providers, but
Definitely do that.
That I suppose it never occurred to me that if I had to do 3 sets of 10, maybe I could do 6 sets of 5 to get the 30 reps. It never really occurred to me that flexibility would be there. And I'm not saying that I should have thought of it. I'm not saying that my PT should have told me. I'm not. That's not where this is. But that's a very interesting way to look at it. I mean, that's helpful to me actually in this moment looking at it, because I think sometimes, it's not that I have a super busy life. I have a very active job. And sometimes because my job is extremely active, I can't do it in the morning because I'm just, no. But I have figured out some I can actually do like during the day at my job. And if I could just do 5 of this at a time. See, I've learned something right there.
Yeah, and I think especially with like, maybe people in the PT realm who are like, "Oh, what is this dude talking about?" I think end of the day, when I see someone, I try to see what trends are they doing that will help their case and not help their case. And because most people tend to not be, "Oh yeah, I run marathons, I run like 50 miles a week and I do X, Y, and Z and I have a really stressful job." It's just a little bit more, it's less demanding of someone's lifestyle. So even if I have someone do like 20 repetitions throughout the day of an exercise that they never do, that's going to promote a adaptation. Will it take more time compared to maybe 3 sets of 10 with maybe more resistance? Yeah, but you also have to make sure that you create the buy-in for the patient. If I'm going to be telling someone, hey, you're in a lot of pain, but if you do 3 sets of 10, I promise you, you'll get better, and they don't get there, there goes compliance, right? So
Right.
it also is on the PT, in my opinion, to create that incentive and show signs that there is a reason to believe what we say, even if it's not necessarily in the most like, textbook way, the most evidence based way. um, but yeah.
Well, because so the things that I'm like writing down, when we talk about PT compared to say other modalities or other ways to, um, everybody's going to know what I'm talking about. I'm never going to get to the word. If you have to take medicine, let's just say you have to take medicine. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
You have to take it. You have to take it twice a day. You have to take it 3 times a day. God
Mm-hmm.
forbid it should come in a pill format because my kid will never take it. These aren't things that you can waver on or adjust. You can't say to somebody, okay, instead of taking the one whole pill in the morning, you can take half now and half later. It doesn't work that way.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if there isn't a specialty that can be flexible to the needs of a patient, it's PT. If PT can't be flexible for my lifestyle, what is going to be flexible for my lifestyle?
Mm-hmm.
I think,
Yep.
it do 3 sets of 10. You can do it anytime during the day. Do 6 sets of 5. You can do it anytime during the day. It literally, here's what I need you to do. And however you can get it into your day, if you get it done, it's going to help you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like a different approach to achieve the same goal. But I also think the beauty of PT is that it doesn't have to be, black and white, just do these things and be fine. I wish it was that easy. But I'll even say just from my end, because like I genuinely do love being a PT. Like if I had to be that routine, like to that dryness, I would say, like I probably wouldn't be a PT anymore because it's too boring in my opinion.
I like that. That's I that, that's such a good I see we got to a place, starting with a simple question, and we got to a place that I think that's a real nugget that people need to have. Because I think PT can just be so frustrating. Because you don't necessarily see results right away. It is a slow process. Um, but how it can be tailored more to fit into your current lifestyle
Mm-hmm.
and still achieve a level of success. Not, as you said, not as quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, if somebody tells you to do 30 squats throughout the day, you'll see it. Do 10 here, 10 here, 10 here, and you got the 30 in.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you do all 30 at the same time, it's going to have a different physiological effect than if you break it up into the 3 different times. But you're still getting it done.
Exactly. And especially with, injuries and stuff like that, like I'm not necessarily in a realm to be like, hey, let's just kind of push your muscles to like, near failure all the time. Like that doesn't sound that feasible as a long-term solution. It might be something that you could do every so often, but I'm not going to tell someone, hey, to really do this unless I feel like they're ready for it. Um, but even then, like that doesn't always seem like the best solution at that time, especially if someone's like, I am having trouble do this. Like, yeah, just do like, max resistance that you can handle that you don't get injured again.
Okay, I'm sure that you can tell when people come back for their in-person visits if they are actually doing the work at home.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. How do you handle, and I know everybody's different and every situation is different,
Mm-hmm.
but how do you handle when it's really blatantly clear that they are not being compliant outside of seeing you?
Yeah, so I do think that I am someone who tries to be like, playful, easygoing, stuff like that. So I try to spin it in a positive way, end of the day. But like, I do think sometimes accountability has to be sometimes a little bit direct. Not even a little bit direct, just direct. Um, so I'll sometimes say like, hey, I'm going to quiz you on your exercises next time I see you. So I hope that you're ready. And generally speaking, the people who do it, they have a level of confidence in how they tell me what they're doing. They know how many sets and reps that they're doing. They may know the nuances that I brought up on their evaluation. But usually when someone's like, oh yeah, like I did that thing that you showed me. And I'm like, hey, you know, I do think that the biggest thing that I can help you with is creating stackable habits that will give you to where you want to be. If we're not setting that foundation early, we're always going to be playing catch up. And especially generally when I see someone, it's more, I tried to do like this home run solution and it didn't work. So what else can I do? Um, and as much as we really hope for that type of change, it's not always going to happen. I can't say it hasn't. There are some times where I'm like, oh, you're feeling that much better. Oh, nice. Cool. Um, but especially the context of, I generally see someone for about like an hour a session and maybe 2 or 3 times. So that's 3 hours of the week, let's say. How many hours are in a week? Way too many. So if someone can tell me in confidence that 3 hours of physical therapy can change, I think it's like 168 hours in a week, you must have a really awesome PT and these exercises are magical. But that's very rare.
Right.
So I have to ask, like, hey, if we can improve that discrepancy of not a lot of moving, if that is the culprit of why someone has pain, to moving and just kind of get them a little bit closer, our bodies don't have such a huge skew in tolerance because it knows how to work within the middle.
And I think, and as you're explaining that to me, in my own brain, I came up with, you can somehow take the time to get to physical therapy, to be there for 60 minutes, to then get home from physical therapy. Yet for some reason, you can't find the time in your day to do 10 or 15 minutes worth of the exercises that I'm giving you to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like I was gonna say, like, I remember listening to an episode with Catherine about like coaching, and she talked about like how coaching is a partnership and stuff like that. But there was a topic of talking about like people will move mountains for what they want to do, and if someone wants to improve their health, you know, enough to the point where they're going to move mountains, like yeah, like you'll shift your priorities to fit that. And if things kind of fall by the wayside, hey, that doesn't make you, a bad person. That doesn't make you lacking in priority. It's just like other things take over. But then, those changes may take a little bit more time. But I do think it is on the PT to set that expectation. And usually when we think about, differences of opinion or things like that, it's usually from a lack of laying out expectations or meeting them if we lay them out.
Thank you for touching on the prioritizing, because that came up recently in another episode as well about, you know, sometimes you have to just make a change, set a line and say, I'm going to reset how I do things and I'm going to start prioritizing my self-care, my injuries, my getting better, my journey. Um, and not necessarily letting every other aspect of your life create an environment where you just stop prioritizing yourself just altogether.
Mhm.
Um, I think that is actually that's a really important one. All right. I know I have taken away. I may go do some exercises after this, but I also may order a big pizza from Lou Malnati's, or I may do both. All right.
I think you should do both.
I know. I should. All right. Thank you so much. I am very much looking forward to having you back on, because Justin and I have already decided on some topics we'd like to dig deeper in, because there's just no way I could have you on. And I mean, because it could be a 4-hour podcast and we'd still never get to anything and everything that I ever wanted to talk about.
That's why I need 8 weeks with someone to help them get better, generally.
Okay, if that's not the most appropriate way to end this podcast, I don't know what is. Other than that, thank you so much for coming on today. I appreciate that. Thank you for sharing the Whitney Houston story. I'm sorry that I picked the wrong song when I did your Instagram post. I thought he sang "I Will Always Love You," and I picked. I will not show the video I took of that evening. That will forever be sealed somewhere. Other than that, thank you all for listening to the Flying Pig Project Start Lines and Swag Bags. As we say, embrace the crazy to unlock a world of possibilities. And if you're in PT, stick with it. We'll see you next time.
See you later.
Ooh, I got the fun ones on.